Have you ever felt the burn, that cold heat in your spine, in the precise second when rage takes over and you realize the darkness that sleeps inside your chest? That feeling, that is his dominion. Today we won't speak of monsters hiding in the shadows. We will speak of the monster who was crowned within your very soul. He is Rarthur, the Dark Red King, the Lord of Fear residing inside you. He is just one of 7 sovereigns who rule over humanity's great weaknesses. And I guarantee you one thing, the fear that Rarthur commands. You have already felt it, and he is waiting for you to feel it again. Welcome to the story of the violence you carry. His name is Rarthur the Red King, Monarch of Blood. He was not born a monster. He became one the moment he understood a truth most humans refuse to face. Violence is not taught. Violence is remembered. Before the dynasty of shadows, Rarthur was a great commander, honored for his devotion and discipline. But war does not honor those who fight it. It strips them down layer by layer until only the most primitive voice remains. The fear Rarthur represents is not blood itself. It is the fear of how easily a person can choose to harm. And every one of us knows this fear. The moment anger rises behind your ribs, the split second before you say something meant to wound, the flash of heat that makes your hands clench. That is when the Red King is closest. He does not force violence. He simply whispers, "See how natural it feels." Cruelty does not begin in the hands. It begins in the heart. Feed it once, and he marks you. Some say his presence reveals itself as a red flicker behind your eyes, a metallic taste before a shout, a heartbeat that sounds like footsteps approaching. Tell me something. Have you felt him? But there is a way to resist. When rage ignites, do not speak. Do not strike. Do not let the fire escape. Let it burn inside you, contained. If you release it, the Red King is no longer watching. He's already inside. Let me tell you how it began. Let me show you the man before the crown, before the blood, before the shadow claimed him as its own. This is not a story for the faint of heart. This is not a tale with heroes. This is the truth about what lives inside us all. And truth, real truth, is never comfortable. Rarthur was once called by another name. A name his mother whispered when he was young. A name that meant protector. Rarthur. The name tasted like copper even then, even before the blood. He grew tall in the northern provinces, where winter came early and stayed late, where the soil was hard and the people were harder, where survival was not a hope, but a calculation made fresh every morning. His father was a blacksmith who beat iron into submission every morning before dawn. Rarthur, a man of few words and fewer smiles. He taught Rarthur that the world respects only strength, that softness is a luxury the poor cannot afford, that every piece of metal has a breaking point, and so does every man. The trick, he said, is knowing yours before someone else finds it. His mother was a weaver who turned thread into patterns so intricate they looked like prayers. Ilara. She spoke in whispers and moved like water. She taught Rarthur that patience was sharper than any blade, that watching was more powerful than acting, that the world reveals its secrets to those who know how to be still. She would sit at her loom for hours, fingers moving in patterns so complex they seemed like magic, and young Rarthur would watch, learning that creation and destruction both require the same thing. Precision, he learned from both. Strength from his father, patience from his mother, and from the world around him, he learned that survival was not a gift. It was a discipline, a choice made 1,000 times a day, to eat or to starve, to fight or to flee, to show strength or to show weakness. And every choice carved a little deeper into the shape of who he would become. The northern provinces were not kind. They were ruled by a loose confederation of lords who fought each other as often as they united. The people suffered. Always the people suffered. But suffering, Rarthur learned early, was not something that happened to you. It was something you either accepted or refused. And refusal, real refusal, required a kind of hardness that most people did not possess. When he was 16, the warlords came. Not raiders, not bandits. An actual army. 3,000 men under the banner of Lord Vrakan, the Iron Wolf. They swept through the northern provinces like a plague, burning fields, conscripting boys, taking whatever they desired. They said they were bringing order. They said they were uniting the north. They said a lot of things. But Rarthur, even at 16, knew the truth. They were taking, and no amount of pretty words changes what taking is. Rarthur watched his father stand in the doorway of their home, hammer in hand, defiant. Gareth Caney was not a man who bowed, not to lords, not to soldiers, not to death itself. He stood there, broad as an ox, hammer raised, and told the soldiers they would have to go through him. And they did. Rarthur watched the blade enter his father's chest, watched his father's eyes go wide with surprise. Not fear, surprise. As if, after all those years of beating iron into submission, he was shocked that flesh was so much easier to break. He fell slowly like a tree and hit the ground with a sound Rarthur would hear for the rest of his life. His mother screamed, a sound like tearing fabric, like something essential breaking. She ran to his father's body and the soldiers laughed. One of them grabbed her. Another raised his blade. And Rarthur watched himself do nothing, not because he was a coward. He could have moved, could have grabbed a weapon, could have died beside his father, brave and stupid and utterly pointless. But something in him, something cold and calculating, whispered, not yet. Not like this, not for nothing. So he watched. He let them take her, let them drag her away, let them burn his home, let them conscript him into their army. And he did not fight. He did not resist. He simply watched and waited and remembered, because rage without skill is just noise, and noise gets you killed. So he waited. He joined the warlord's army not as a victim, but as a student. He learned how to hold a sword, how to read the angles of a fight, how to see the weakness in an opponent's stance before they even moved, how to turn defense into offense in a single breath, how to make violence efficient, clean, precise. He learned discipline. He learned strategy. He learned control. And he learned something else, something darker, something that would eventually define everything he became. He learned that violence, when applied with precision, could reshape the world. The first time he killed a man, Rarthur was 17. It was in a skirmish against a rival warlord's forces. A soldier, older and more experienced, came at him with a spear. Rarthur sidestepped, deflected, and drove his blade under the man's ribs, up and through, the way his instructors had taught him, clean, efficient, fatal. The man looked at him with surprise, the same surprise Rarthur had seen in his father's eyes. That moment of, oh, this is how it ends. And then the light went out, like snuffing a candle. One moment a person, the next moment meat. Rarthur expected to feel something, horror, guilt, remorse, something, but what he felt instead was relief, not joy, not satisfaction, relief, as if a question that had been burning inside him since his father's death had finally been answered. Yes, I can do this. Yes, I am capable. Yes, I will survive. That night, in his tent, he examined this feeling, turned it over in his mind like a strange coin, tried to understand what it meant, and slowly, carefully, he began to realize something that would change everything. He did not hate killing. He did not love it either, but he did not hate it. And that, he understood, made him different. Most men killed out of necessity and spent the rest of their lives trying to forget it, trying to pretend it had not marked them, trying to scrub the blood from their hands even when their hands were clean. But Rarthur looked at his hands that night and saw no stain. He saw tools, instruments, extensions of will, and he understood in a flash of clarity so bright it almost hurt that most people went through life pretending they were not capable of what they were absolutely capable of. And that pretense, that comfortable lie, was what made them weak. He did not have to pretend. He had seen what he was capable of. He had felt the relief of knowing. And now, armed with that knowledge, he could become something most men never achieved. Not a soldier, not even a warrior, but something more fundamental. A weapon that thought. A blade that chose. By the time he was 22, Rarthur was no longer a conscript. He was a captain. He had distinguished himself in a dozen battles, not through bravery. Bravery was common. War made everyone brave eventually, or it killed them. No, Rarthur distinguished himself through competence, through the cold, calculating precision with which he approached violence. He did not fight battles. He solved them, like mathematical problems, like chess games played with blood. He learned to read terrain the way his mother read thread patterns. He learned to anticipate enemy movements the way his father anticipated the breaking point of metal. He learned to turn chaos into order through the application of controlled violence. And his superiors noticed. By 25, he was a commander. By 30, a general. By 35, a legend. Men followed him not because he inspired them, but because he won. Every time, without exception. Rarthur did not lose battles. He dismantled them. He broke them down into their component parts and destroyed them piece by piece with the patience of a craftsman. But wars are long. And in the long hours between conflicts, when the adrenaline fades and the silence grows heavy, a man begins to hear things. Whispers that sound like his own thoughts. Thoughts that feel like someone else's voice. Questions that have no good answers. Rarthur began to notice patterns. The way his heartbeat would quicken before an ambush, as if his body knew violence was coming before his mind did. The way his hands would steady, not from training, but from something deeper. A hunger, a pull, an anticipation that felt almost like desire. He told himself it was instinct, that he was simply becoming more attuned to the rhythms of war, that this was what mastery felt like. But instinct does not smile. And Rarthur found himself smiling in battle, not from joy, but from recognition, as if he were meeting an old friend. As if violence was not something he did, but something he was. And slowly, over years of campaigns and conquests, Rarthur began to understand a truth that terrified and liberated him in equal measure. He was not a man who had learned to kill. He was a man who had always known how. The war had not taught him violence. It had simply given him permission to remember what he had always been. The war ended eventually. All wars do. His side won. The Iron Wolf united the northern provinces under his banner and declared himself High King. Rarthur was hailed as a hero, the weapon that had won the war, the general who had never lost. The Iron Wolf offered him land, titles, a position at court, a voice in councils, the respect and gratitude of a nation, and Rarthur accepted. Because what else does a man built for war do when the war is over? He was 37 years old. He had spent more than half his life fighting. He had killed more men than he could count. He had become the thing his father's death had demanded. Strong, unbreakable, victorious. But victory, he discovered, feels different than you imagine. It does not taste like triumph. It tastes like ash. He tried to be normal. He tried to attend the feasts, to listen to the musicians play songs about his conquests, to watch dancers interpret his battles as art, to sit in councils and discuss taxes and trade routes and all the soft concerns of peacetime, to smile at lords who had never held a sword, to bow to a king whose throne he had won, to pretend that the man who had killed hundreds could simply become the man who managed estates. But peace felt like a coat that didn't fit. It hung loose on his shoulders. It chafed. Every moment of it felt like a lie, and in the quiet moments, late at night, when the palace was dark and the halls were empty, Rarthur would stand at his window and feel the pull again, that whisper, that hunger, that voice that said, "This is not what you are. This is not what you were made for." And he would clench his fists until his knuckles went white, trying to keep it contained, trying to be the man they wanted him to be, the hero, the loyal general, the decorated warrior enjoying his well-earned peace. But he was not that man. He had never been that man, and pretending was becoming harder every day. One night a thief broke into his chambers, a foolish boy no older than 17, desperate and stupid, and so obviously doomed that Rarthur almost pitied him. He held a knife, trembling. His hands shook so badly the blade rattled. He was thin, underfed, probably orphaned by the same war that had made Rarthur a hero. The irony was not lost on Rarthur. He could have disarmed him easily, could have called the guards, could have had him arrested and tried and dealt with through proper channels, could have shown mercy. should have shown mercy. Any normal man would have shown mercy. But when Rarthur looked into the boy's eyes, he did not see a thief. He saw fear, real primal animal fear. The kind of fear that makes people dangerous. The kind of fear that Rarthur had learned to smell like blood in the water. And fear, he remembered, was an invitation. He moved without thinking. His body knew what to do before his mind caught up. His hands found the boy's throat. The knife clattered to the floor, and in the seconds that followed, as the boy's eyes went wide, and his breath became shallow gasps, and his struggles weakened and finally stopped, Rarthur felt something he had not felt in years. Relief, not joy, not satisfaction, not triumph. Relief, as if a pressure valve had been released, as if he had been holding his breath for years and could finally exhale, as if he had been pretending to be someone else and could finally stop. When the boy stopped moving, Rarthur let him drop. He stood there, alone in the dark, staring at his hands. The same hands that had killed dozens in battle. The same hands that had been honored and decorated and lauded as instruments of justice. The same hands that now held the throat-shaped bruises of an unarmed boy, who had probably just been hungry, and Rarthur understood. This was not a mistake. This was not a moment of weakness. This was not an aberration or an accident or something to be explained away. This was who he was, who he had always been. The war had not made him a killer. It had simply given him permission, a socially acceptable context, a framework that made violence heroic instead of monstrous. But the violence itself, that had always been there, waiting, hungry, patient, and now in peacetime, that permission was gone. But the need remained, the hunger remained, the truth of what he was remained. He could have stopped there, could have confessed, could have walked away, could have exiled himself to some distant corner of the kingdom and lived out his days in quiet penance. But Rarthur was not a man who walked away. He was not a man who confessed. He was not a man who accepted guilt for being what he was. He was a man who solved problems. And this, he realized, was a problem with a solution. If the world would not give him war, he would create the conditions for violence. If society would not permit his nature, he would reshape society. If peace was a cage, he would break it, not loudly, not obviously. Rarthur was too skilled for that. He would do it the way he did everything, with precision, with patience, with the cold calculation of a man who understood that power was not taken. It was constructed, piece by piece, choice by choice, body by body. It started small. A rival lord who spoke too boldly at court. Rarthur arranged for him to have an accident, a hunting trip. A loose arrow, tragic. The Lord's son inherited and proved much more cooperative. A merchant who controlled too much of the grain supply. Rarthur discovered evidence of treason. Fabricated evidence, but evidence nonetheless. The man was executed. His assets seized. His family scattered. The grain flowed where Rarthur wanted it to flow. A general who questioned Rarthur's judgment. A duel was arranged, honorable, public, fatal. The general's supporters fell silent. Rarthur's reputation grew. Each act of violence was justified. Each had a reason. Each could be explained as necessary, as duty, as service to the kingdom, and maybe some of them were. But Rarthur knew the truth. He was not doing these things because they were necessary. He was doing them because he needed to, because the pressure built and built until it had to be released. And each time the relief came, the pressure released. The hunger fed, but hunger is a strange thing. The more you feed it, the larger it grows. And Rarthur began to realize that small acts of violence were no longer enough. He needed more. Not just conflict, but control. Not just blood, but power. Not just the act of violence, but the architecture of it, the philosophy, the system. He began to study cruelty the way other men studied philosophy or theology. How pain could be used not just to harm, but to shape behavior. How fear could be wielded like a scalpel. How a reputation, carefully cultivated, could do more damage than any army. How violence, when properly administered, could create order more effectively than law. He learned that true violence is not loud. It is quiet. It is the threat that never needs to be spoken. The presence that makes others reconsider. The name that changes the air in a room. The reputation that precedes you like a shadow and does your work before you even arrive. Rarthur became that name, that shadow, that presence. Within 5 years of the war's end, he had consolidated more power than the High King himself. The Iron Wolf still wore the crown, but everyone knew who really ruled, who really decided, who really mattered. Nobles who once questioned him fell silent. Those who opposed him disappeared. Their fates were unclear, but universally understood. No one investigated. No one asked questions, because asking questions about Rarthur was itself a dangerous act. A way of painting a target on yourself, of becoming a problem that needed solving, and Rarthur wore his reputation like armor. He cultivated it, fed it, shaped it into something that served him better than any army ever could. He became the man you did not cross, the name you did not speak carelessly. The shadow you prayed would never turn its attention toward you, but there was something else happening, something he did not expect. Something that began to fascinate him more than the violence itself. The more he embraced what he was, the more he began to see it in others. He could recognize it now. That flicker behind the eyes, that tension in the shoulders, that micro-expression that revealed the truth beneath the civilized mask. That moment when someone decides, consciously or not, that harm is acceptable. He saw it in the noble who struck his servant for serving wine at the wrong temperature, in the merchant who cheated a widow out of her inheritance, in the soldier who took what was not offered, in the mother who beat her child, in the priest who preached forgiveness while harboring rage, in everyone, everywhere, all the time. And Rarthur understood that he was not unique, he was not special, he was not even unusual, he was simply honest. Every human being carried this capacity, this potential, this darkness. They just pretended they didn't. They buried it beneath manners and morality and the thin veneer of civilization. But Rarthur had torn that veneer away, and once you see what lies beneath, you cannot unsee it. Once you acknowledge the darkness within yourself, you begin to recognize it in everyone else. And the world, seen through that lens, becomes a very different place. It becomes a stage where everyone is performing, pretending to be better than they are, pretending the darkness is not there, pretending that civilization is something more than a collective agreement to temporarily suppress our most basic instincts. And the performance, Rarthur realized, was exhausting everyone, driving everyone slowly mad with the effort of pretending. What if, he wondered, we stopped pretending? What if we acknowledged the darkness, named it, accepted it, built systems around it instead of against it? What if violence was not something to be suppressed, but something to be channeled, controlled, ritualized? What if the problem was not violence itself, but the dishonesty around it? These thoughts consumed him. He began writing them down, codifying them, turning his personal philosophy into something larger. A framework, a system, a way of seeing the world that made sense of everything he had experienced and observed. He called it the Dynasty of Shadows, because shadows are what remain when you strip away the light. When you remove the illusions, when you face the truth that civilization is built on, that beneath every law, every custom, every act of kindness, there is violence, the threat of violence, the memory of violence, the potential for violence. Laws work because we fear the consequences of breaking them. Morality works because we fear social punishment. Kindness works because we fear retaliation if we are cruel. Everything, when you really examine it, rests on the foundation of violence. Potential violence, controlled violence, but violence nonetheless. And Rarthur began teaching that this was not something to fear. It was something to embrace, to master, to wield consciously instead of unconsciously. He began to collect people, not followers in the traditional sense, but students, those who like him understood the truth, who had tasted violence and found it clarifying, who no longer believed in the comfortable lies that kept society stable. He did not recruit them through speeches or promises. He simply recognized them, that flicker behind the eyes, that understanding that set them apart. And they recognized him. They found their way to him like iron to a lodestone, drawn by something they could not name. but could not resist. They became his court, his council, his inner circle. Men and women who had stopped pretending, who had torn away their own veils and stood naked in their honest capacity for harm. They were not monsters, not in the traditional sense. They were simply conscious, aware, honest about what they were and what they could do. Together they built something new. Not a kingdom in the traditional sense, but a philosophy, a religion of the real, a way of living that acknowledged darkness instead of denying it, that built systems around human nature instead of against it. That said, yes, we are capable of terrible things, and that is precisely why we must be conscious of that capability. They called themselves the Shadow Court, and their kingdom was not a place. It was a state of mind, a way of seeing, a lens through which the world became brutally, terrifyingly clear. Rarthur, now openly calling himself the Red King, taught that violence was not something to be suppressed. It was something to be understood, mastered, made conscious. He taught that the real danger was not violence itself, but unconscious violence. Violence that erupted from denial, from repression, from the pressure cooker of civilization that demanded everyone pretend they were not capable of what they were absolutely capable of. He taught that if you acknowledge your capacity for harm, you can control it. If you deny it, it controls you. And when it finally erupts, when the pressure becomes too great and the pretense cracks, that is when real damage is done. Not by those who accept their nature, but by those who are surprised by it. The Red King's lessons spread, not through conquest, not through conversion, but through recognition. Those who were ready to hear heard. Those who were not did not. And slowly, quietly, a shadow network began to form across the kingdom and beyond. People who saw the world the way Rarthur saw it, who acknowledged what most people denied, who chose consciousness over comfort, but consciousness comes at a cost. And Rarthur began to pay it. The more he embraced his nature, the more he understood violence, the more hollow he began to feel. Not guilty. Guilt requires believing you have done something wrong. And Rarthur did not believe that. He believed he had done what was necessary, what was honest, what was true, but truth he discovered is cold. It does not comfort. It does not warm. It simply is. And when you strip away all the illusions, all the comforting lies, all the pretense that makes life bearable, what remains is often just emptiness. He ruled for decades. He shaped kingdoms. He influenced generations. He built a philosophy that would outlast his body. He became more than a man. He became a symbol, an idea, a force. The Red King, the monarch of blood, the shadow that whispered truth into unwilling ears. But in his private moments, in the hours before dawn, when he stood alone in his chambers and looked at his hands that had killed more people than he could count, hands that had shaped history through violence, he sometimes wondered if he had made a mistake. Not a moral mistake. He was past morality, but an existential one. By embracing his nature so completely, by tearing away every illusion, by becoming purely and totally honest about what he was, had he lost something essential, something that made life more than just the exercise of power, something that made existence more than just the conscious wielding of violence? He did not know. And not knowing, for a man who prided himself on clarity, was perhaps the most uncomfortable feeling of all. Years became decades. Decades became a lifetime. The Red King grew old, though he never grew soft. His body aged, but his eyes remained sharp. His hands trembled, but they could still kill. His reputation, if anything, grew stronger, because now it was not just based on what he could do. It was based on what he had done. A lifetime of violence, a catalogue of bodies, a legacy written in blood, and still the emptiness remained. The question remained, had he found truth, or had he simply found a truth? And if there were other truths, truths he had dismissed or ignored, or never even considered, what had he sacrificed by choosing this one? The Red King did not speak of these doubts. Kings do not doubt. Symbols do not waver. Legends do not question. He maintained his presence, his power, his terrible clarity. But inside, in the spaces between heartbeats, he wondered. And then, one night, something changed. He was old now, 73. his body failing slowly but inevitably. He stood at his window, as he had countless times before, looking out at the kingdom he had shaped through violence, and he felt it. A presence, not external, internal, as if something inside him had been waiting, watching, growing. The shadow he had embraced was not just a metaphor, it was real, and it had been feeding on him even as he fed on others. All those years of violence, all that blood, all those choices, they had not just shaped the world. They had shaped him, changed him, transformed him into something that was no longer quite human. He looked at his hands and saw them differently, not as flesh and bone, but as symbols, as weapons, as extensions of something larger. The violence he had wielded had not been his to use. He had been its instrument, its vessel, its voice, and in that moment Rarthur understood the final truth, the one that completed his transformation. He had not mastered violence. Violence had mastered him. He had not become conscious of his nature. He had become consumed by it, and the emptiness he felt was not the price of truth. It was the absence of everything else. He had won. He had achieved what he set out to achieve. He had become pure, honest, uncompromising. He had torn away every illusion and embraced his nature completely. And in doing so, he had become something that could no longer feel warmth, joy, connection, love. Anything except the cold clarity of acknowledged darkness. He had become the Red King, not just in name, but in essence, a shadow-given form, a truth-given voice, a force of nature wearing human skin. And that was his curse, not punishment for his crimes, but the inevitable conclusion of his philosophy. You cannot embrace only darkness without losing the light. You cannot acknowledge only violence without forgetting everything else. But the Red King did not turn back, did not recant, did not seek redemption, because that would be dishonest. And honesty, even terrible honesty, even honesty that costs everything, was the one principle he would not abandon. He had made his choice. He would live with the consequences. And when he died, he would die as he had lived, conscious, aware, honest. His death, when it came, was quiet. No battle, no assassination, no dramatic finale. Simply age, his body giving out, his heart stopping, his breath fading. He died alone in his chambers, standing at his window, looking out at a world that would continue long after he was gone. But death was not the end of the Red King, because ideas do not die. Shadows do not fade. Truth once spoken cannot be unspoken. And the philosophy he had built, the dynasty of shadows, continued, grew, spread, not through conquest, but through recognition. Through that moment when someone looks in the mirror and sees what they are capable of, and chooses to acknowledge it instead of deny it, the Red King became legend, then myth. Then something more, a presence, a force, a shadow that walks beside us all, not causing violence, but revealing the capacity for it, not making us cruel, but showing us that we already are, that we have always been, that the potential for harm is written into our DNA, our history, our nature, and his whisper, soft as breath, continues, in moments of rage, in flashes of anger, in the split second before you choose whether to harm or to hold back. See how natural it feels. See how easy it would be. See what you are capable of. This is the legacy of the Red King, not a kingdom, not a dynasty, but a truth, uncomfortable, undeniable, unavoidable. We are all capable of violence. We all carry darkness. We all have a shadow. And the only question that matters is what we do with it. Do we deny it and let it control us? Do we embrace it and let it consume us? Or do we acknowledge it, name it, understand it, and then choose what comes next? The Red King represents the first two options, denial and consumption. He shows us where both paths lead. Denial leads to unconscious violence, to eruptions, to surprises, to harm done without meaning to. Consumption leads to emptiness, to becoming the darkness, to losing everything except the violence. But there is a third path, one the Red King never found. Acknowledgement without surrender. Consciousness without consumption. Seeing the shadow clearly and choosing to live in the light anyway. not through denial, but through choice, through daily, moment-by-moment decisions to be more than what our darkest impulses demand. This is the lesson hidden in the warning, the truth beneath the cautionary tale. The Red King shows us what we could become, but in showing us that, he also shows us what we don't have to be. We can be honest about our capacity for harm without making harm our identity. We can acknowledge the darkness without living in it. We can see the shadow clearly and still walk toward the light, but that requires something the Red King did not have. Not courage, not strength, but hope. The belief that we are more than our worst impulses. That consciousness can be used to rise above instead of sink into. That seeing clearly does not mean accepting darkness as inevitable. And this, perhaps, is why the Red King endures. Not as a villain, not as a hero, but as a mirror, showing us what we carry, what we're capable of, what we might become if we follow his path. And in seeing that reflection, giving us the chance to choose differently, to be honest without being cruel, to be conscious without being consumed, to acknowledge the shadow and still seek the light. This is the path the Red King never took, the choice he never made, the truth he never found, and now that choice comes to you. The Red King has shown you what he is, what you could be, what lives inside us all. He has whispered his truth, revealed his shadow, offered his clarity, and the question remains, what will you do with it? Will you deny what you've learned? Pretend the capacity is not there? Return to comfortable lies? Will you embrace it fully? Let the shadow consume you? Become what the Red King became. Or will you walk the third path? The one that acknowledges darkness but chooses light. The one that sees clearly but acts with intention. The one that is honest about what we are capable of but refuses to let that capability define us. This is the study of the Red King, the first of the 7 Shadow Kings, the one who teaches that violence is remembered, not taught. That cruelty begins in the heart. That consciousness is both gift and burden. That truth without wisdom is just another form of darkness. His throne stands empty now, not because he's gone, but because he was never really there. He is not a being in a distant realm. He is a moment, a possibility, a choice. He is what happens when we embrace only one truth and ignore all others. When we see only darkness and forget that light exists. The Red King walks beside us all. In every moment of anger, every flash of rage, every temptation to harm, but he does not command, he does not force. He simply reminds us of what we are capable of. And in being reminded, we gain the power to choose. Will you release the fire? Or will you let it burn contained until it becomes something else? Something that does not destroy but transforms. Something that does not harm but strengthens. Something that illuminates instead of consumes. The Red King cannot answer this question for you. No one can. It is the question each of us must answer for ourselves. Every day, every moment, every time the shadow speaks, and your answer defines not just what you do, but who you are. Not what you're capable of, but what you choose. And choice, conscious choice, made with full knowledge of what you carry and what you could do, is the only real power we have. This is the lesson. This is the warning. This is the truth of the Red King. He shows us the darkness so we can choose the light. He reveals the shadow so we can seek the sun. He whispers violence so we can choose peace. Not ignorant peace, but conscious peace. Peace that knows what it costs and chooses it anyway. Walk carefully. The Red King watches, but so does something else. Something he never acknowledged. Something he denied by embracing only one truth. The capacity for violence is real, but so is the capacity for mercy, for compassion, for choosing not to harm even when we easily could. The Red King knew only one of these truths, and it made him powerful. But it also made him empty, hollow, alone. You can know both truths, acknowledge both capacities, see clearly in both directions, and in that complete vision, that full honesty, find not emptiness, but wholeness. This is the study. This is the path. This is the choice that defines everything. The Red King's story does not end with his death. Death is merely a transition, a shedding of flesh, a release from the limitations of a single body. Because by the time Rarthur died, he had become something more than a man. He had become an archetype, a pattern, a truth that repeats itself across generations. There are always those who discover what he discovered, who feel what he felt, who recognize the hunger for what it is and choose to feed it. The Red King is not one person. He is a role, a throne that calls to certain souls across time and space. And when they answer, when they sit upon that throne of acknowledged darkness, they become him, or he becomes them. The distinction no longer matters. In every generation, in every culture, in every corner of human civilization, the Red King emerges. Sometimes as a warlord, sometimes as a tyrant, sometimes as a philosopher of violence, sometimes as something quieter, more subtle, a teacher who shows others how natural harm can feel, a leader who makes cruelty seem reasonable, a voice that whispers justifications for the unjustifiable. The face changes, the context changes, but the essence remains. The Red King is the part of humanity that refuses to pretend, that tears away the comfortable lies and forces us to confront what we are capable of. And his dynasty, the dynasty of shadows, is not a lineage of blood. It is a lineage of recognition, of those who see clearly and choose darkness. But here is what the stories rarely tell you, what the warnings leave out, what the Red King himself understood too late. Darkness is not freedom. Clarity is not power. And embracing your nature completely does not make you whole. It makes you fragment, piece by piece, until only the darkness remains, and everything else, everything that made you human, is gone. The Red King's final years were not spent in triumph. They were spent in isolation, surrounded by followers who feared him, students who studied him, subjects who obeyed him, but no one who knew him, no one who saw past the symbol to the man who had once been Rarthur, who had once had a mother who wove patterns like prayers, a father who believed in the dignity of honest work, a name that meant protector. All of that was gone, consumed by the shadow he had chosen to embrace. And what remained was powerful, yes, legendary, yes, but also profoundly, devastatingly alone, because when you choose only darkness, you cannot be known by those who live in light. And when you make violence your truth, you cannot connect with those who seek other truths. The Red King died as he lived, conscious, aware, honest, but also isolated, empty, wondering if the price of clarity was worth what he had paid. And in his final moment, as his heart beat its last, and his breath faded, and the darkness he had embraced finally claimed him completely, he had one final thought. What if I was wrong? Not about the capacity for violence. That was real, undeniable, written into every human heart. But about what to do with that capacity. About whether embracing it completely was wisdom or just another form of surrender. About whether consciousness meant accepting darkness or choosing to rise above it. But it was too late. The choice had been made. The path had been walked. The throne had been claimed. And the Red King passed from life into legend, from legend into myth, from myth into something more primal, a shadow, a whisper, a presence that walks beside us all, reminding us of what we carry and what we could become. And his court, the dynasty of shadows, continues, because there are always those who hear the call, who feel the hunger, who recognize the truth that violence is not taught but remembered. And some of them choose as Rarthur chose, to embrace it, to master it, to become it. But others, hearing the same truth, make a different choice. They acknowledge the darkness, name it, understand it, and then choose to live differently. Not through denial, but through conscious opposition, through the daily decision to be more than what their worst impulses demand. These are the ones the Red King never understood. The ones who see as clearly as he saw, but choose differently. Who carry the same capacity for harm, but refuse to define themselves by it. Who walk through the shadow without becoming shadow. Who hear the whisper and say, I know what you are. I know what you offer. And I choose something else. This is the hidden teaching. The lesson the Red King learned too late. Consciousness is not the end. It is the beginning. Seeing clearly is not the goal. It is the starting point. What you do after you see, after you know, after you acknowledge the truth of what you carry, that is what defines you. The Red King chose to become his darkness, to let it consume everything else, to build a throne from acknowledgement and rule from a place of brutal honesty. And he became powerful, legendary, eternal, but also hollow, alone, lost. You do not have to make the same choice. You can see the darkness clearly and still choose the light. You can acknowledge the capacity for violence and still practice mercy. You can be honest about what you are capable of and still decide to be something better. This is harder, much harder, because it requires holding two truths simultaneously: that you could harm and that you choose not to, that violence is an option and that you reject it, that the darkness is real and that you walk toward light anyway. The Red King could not do this, or would not. The distinction does not matter. He chose one truth and made it absolute, and it gave him power, but cost him everything else. You can choose differently. You can hold the full complexity, the complete picture, the honest assessment of both what you could do and what you will do. And in that space between capacity and choice, between potential and action, between the shadow and the light, you become something the Red King never achieved. Not just conscious, but free to choose, to decide, to be more than your nature demands. This is the true power, not the power to harm. That is easy, natural, remembered, but the power to choose not to harm even when you easily could. The power to acknowledge the darkness and walk away from it. The power to see clearly and still act with intention, with purpose, with hope. The Red King represents one path. The path of absolute honesty without wisdom, of clarity without compassion, of consciousness without choice. And his story serves as both warning and invitation. Warning of what happens when you embrace only darkness. Invitation to choose differently, to be honest but not cruel, to be conscious but not consumed, to see clearly but act wisely. Now, centuries after his death, the Red King's presence remains, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as a force, a pattern, a moment that repeats whenever anger rises, whenever violence whispers, whenever the choice presents itself. Harm or hold back, release or contain, shadow or light, he is there, not commanding, not forcing, simply observing, simply noting how natural it would feel, how easy it would be, how justified it might seem. And in that observation, he gives you the chance to know yourself, to see what you are capable of, to acknowledge the truth of your nature, and then, having seen clearly, having acknowledged honestly, you can choose, not from ignorance, not from pretense, but from knowledge, from full awareness of both what you could do and what you will do. And that choice made consciously defines everything. The Red King's throne stands empty, waiting, calling. There are always those who hear the call and answer, who sit upon that throne and become what he became, the shadow incarnate, the voice of acknowledged darkness, the king of brutal honesty. But the throne does not have to be filled. The call does not have to be answered. You can hear it and walk away. You can acknowledge it and choose differently. You can see the shadow clearly and still seek the sun. This is the lesson the Red King teaches by negative example, by showing us what happens when we choose only one truth, when we embrace only darkness, when we let clarity become cruelty and honesty become harm. He shows us a path, and in showing us that path, reveals that other paths exist. You are standing at a crossroads now, having heard his story, having felt his presence, having acknowledged, perhaps for the first time, the full truth of what you are capable of. The shadow is real. The capacity is there. The Red King is not lying. Violence is natural. Harm is easy. Cruelty makes a certain kind of sense, but so does mercy. So does compassion. So does the choice to use your strength to protect instead of harm, to use your clarity to help instead of hurt, to use your consciousness to rise instead of sink. Two paths, two truths, two choices. The Red King chose one and became powerful and empty and alone. You can choose the other and become something he never imagined. Not weak, not naive, not ignorant, but strong enough to be gentle, clear enough to be kind, conscious enough to choose compassion even when violence would be easier. This is the hidden power, the secret the Red King never learned. That true strength is not the ability to harm, is the ability to choose not to harm even when you could. That real power is not dominance over others, it is mastery over yourself. That genuine consciousness is not just seeing what you are capable of, it is choosing what you will become. The Red King watches. He always watches. In every moment of anger, every flash of rage, every temptation to harm. But he is not your master unless you make him so. He is not your king unless you crown him. He's simply a reflection, a mirror, a truth about what you carry. And having seen that truth, you can choose what comes next. Will you serve the shadow, or will you acknowledge it and walk away? Will you embrace the darkness, or will you see it clearly and choose light anyway? Will you become what the Red King became, or will you become something he never imagined? The choice is yours. It has always been yours. The Red King cannot force you, can only remind you, can only whisper, can only wait. And your answer to his whisper determines not what you are capable of, but who you choose to be. This is the study of the Red King, the monarch of blood, the shadow that speaks truth, the voice that reminds us we are all capable of terrible things, and in reminding us, gives us the chance to choose to be something more. Walk carefully, choose wisely, and remember that consciousness without compassion is just another form of darkness. That clarity without kindness is just cruelty with better vocabulary. That seeing clearly is meaningless if it does not lead to acting wisely. The Red King's lesson is complete. His story is told. His truth is revealed. And now you carry that truth, that knowledge, that uncomfortable awareness of what lives inside you, what you are capable of, what you could become. The question is not whether you will hear the whisper. You will. Everyone does. The question is what you will answer when it comes, when rage rises, when violence calls, when the Red King draws close and offers his brutal clarity. Will you say yes? Will you embrace the shadow and take your place in his dynasty? Or will you say no? Not from ignorance, not from fear, but from choice, from conscious, deliberate, informed choice, from knowing exactly what you are capable of and deciding to be something better anyway. This is the only battle that matters. Not against the Red King, but with yourself. Not against violence, but for consciousness. Not between shadow and light, but between acknowledging darkness and being consumed by it. And in that battle, you are not alone. Because for every soul who answers the Red King's call, there are countless others who hear it and walk away, who see clearly and choose compassion, who acknowledge the darkness and seek the light, who carry the capacity for harm and practice mercy anyway. They are the unnamed, the uncelebrated, the ones who do not build dynasties or claim thrones or become legends. But they are the ones who make civilization possible, who make connection real, who make love more than just a word. They are the ones who see what the Red King saw and choose differently. And in choosing differently, they become something he never could, free. The Red King's story ends here, but yours continues. Every moment, every choice, every time the shadow whispers, and you must decide. Not whether you are capable of harm, you are, everyone is, but whether you will choose to harm. And that choice, made consciously, honestly, wisely, is what defines you, not your capacity, but your choice, not your nature, but your will. Not what you could do, but what you decide to do. This is the power the Red King never found, and it is yours. If you choose it, walk carefully. The shadows are always watching, but so is something else, something brighter, something that says you are more than your worst impulse, more than your darkest thought, more than what the Red King sees when he looks at you. You are the choice between them. You are the moment of decision. You are the answer to the whisper. And that answer, whatever it is yours to give. The study continues. 6 more shadows await. 6 more truths to face. 6 more mirrors to look into. But you have passed through the first. You have met the Red King. You have heard his lesson. You have felt his presence. And you are still you. Still choosing. Still walking. Still deciding moment by moment what kind of person you will be. The Red King cannot take that from you. No shadow can. Your choice remains your own, always, forever, until the very end. Choose wisely, choose honestly, and above all, choose consciously. Because that is the only throne that matters, the only kingdom worth ruling, the only crown worth wearing, the kingdom of your own conscious choice. The throne of deliberate action, the crown of knowing what you are capable of and deciding what you will become. This is the way. This is the path. This is the truth beyond the Red King's truth. And it is yours. If you have the courage to claim it, the story is complete. The shadow has spoken. The lesson has been taught. And now the choice is yours. What will you answer when the Red King whispers? What will you become when the shadow calls? What will you choose when the moment arrives? Only you can answer. Only you can decide. Only you can walk the path that follows. Walk carefully. Walk wisely. Walk consciously. And remember, always remember, that you are more than what you fear, more than what you could do, more than what the darkness suggests. You are the choice. You are the light. You are the answer to every shadow's question. And that makes you sovereign in ways the Red King never imagined. The Red King's reign is over. Yours is just beginning. Choose well. The shadows are watching, but so is everything else. And between them you walk free. This is the end of the first study. The Red King, the monarch of blood, the shadow that reminds us what we carry. Thank you for walking this path. Thank you for facing this truth. Thank you for choosing to see clearly. Now go. Carry this knowledge. Let it inform your choices. Let it strengthen your will. Let it remind you always that consciousness is the beginning of freedom. That seeing clearly is the first step toward acting wisely. That acknowledging the darkness is how we choose the light. The Red King has taught his lesson. The dynasty stands revealed. The shadow has spoken its truth. And you, having heard it all, are now equipped to walk differently. To choose better. To be more, not perfect, not innocent, not ignorant of what you carry, but conscious, deliberate, free. And that freedom hard-won through honest self-examination is worth more than any throne. Walk carefully. The study of the 7 Shadow Kings continues, but you have passed through the first gate. You have faced the first truth. You have met the Red King and lived to choose another path. That is no small thing. That is everything. And it is yours forever, a gift wrapped in darkness, a truth wrapped in warning, a choice wrapped in consciousness. Use it well, choose wisely, and remember that the Red King, powerful as he is only one voice, one truth, one path. And you, having heard him, are free to choose differently. This is the greatest power. This is the deepest wisdom. This is the truth beyond the shadow. And it is yours now, always, forever. Choose well, walk free, and know that whatever comes next, you have already won the only battle that truly matters. The battle for conscious choice. The battle for self-knowledge. The battle for the right to decide who you will become. The Red King bows. The shadow recedes. The whisper fades. And you remain conscious, aware, free, and ready for whatever comes next. This is the way. This is the truth. This is the study complete. Until we meet again, in the next shadow, in the next darkness, in the next uncomfortable truth, remember this. You are the light that sees the darkness clearly. You are the choice that defies the shadow. You are the answer that every king of violence fears most. Not denial, not ignorance, but conscious, deliberate, informed refusal. And in that refusal, you become more powerful than any throne, more free than any dynasty. More real than any legend. You become yourself, fully, honestly, consciously, and that is everything. The Red King's story ends. Yours continues. Walk well.